Alright, hey guys, what's up? Welcome to our fourth video in our brand new video series, Chris and Andreas Explain
Snowboarding to you!
To you!
Because it's not top of the muffin to you!
Where we explain the ins and outs of snowboarding and all of those, snowboarding terminologies that you may come across and not understand. So anyway, today's video is all about camber profiles part 2, because the number one thing that I got as a response to my last video was the camber profiles that I missed.
Pure pop?
Yeah.
Missed that one. Yeah, everybody likes to armchair quarterback with stuff. I think there's so many different types that you need 2 videos. And that's why we're here today.
There's probably going to be even more videos on camber profiles as they continue to evolve into the future. I can't wait for holographic force field snowboards. What will the camber profiles be like then?
I wonder, like, hoverboard snowboards?
Back to the Future, but like snowboarding?
That would actually take it away from the enjoyment, I think.
How about adaptive snowboards, where literally the camber profile changes depending on the terrain that you're in, like a smart snowboard? Let's get on it. So first up, we've got this beauty right here, the Burton process. One of my favorite graphics this season so far. It's got the waving bear.
Everybody's friend.
Hello. So, pure pop camber.
Yep.
The whole concept here is that you're getting the benefits of camber,
Yep.
but these flat zones...
And then mini rocker. That's the flat's right under the inserts.
No, the flat's like past the inserts.
Just past.
Yeah, so it's like from here to here.
Oh yeah.
So one of the benefits of this is loadability. It's really easy to load an ollie because there's so much space here to lean back on and feel stable with. Also really good for pressing, also really good for,
initiating turns and not super catchy.
Exactly, right? So it's designed to still have the benefits of camber without being super hooky. Catchy.
Hooking it
Catchy.
up.
Captain Hook.
I left that last one in. I thought that was funny. You have camber in the middle section of the board, basically where the bear is, more or less, or just outside of the insert points are flat, and then you have a little rocker. So you have camber here to give you that pop, to give you that response when you're trying to carve and do stuff like that, and then you have that nice flat section for presses and ollies. Loadability. Yeah, guys, when you have that little bit of a flat zone in the tip and the tail, it's more surface area to redistribute your weight on. So you can imagine it's a little bit easier to balance on those flat zones. It's easier to actually load an ollie because you can sort of bring yourself back into the board and balance on the tip and the tail a little bit more. Yeah, especially when you're going for those really big ollies where you're putting a lot of force through there and the board is bending a lot. On other boards, it's going to be pushing on a tiny bit of the board, whereas on this, you have a nice big section.
And then it's also slightly more forgiving as well. You can imagine it's more catch-free than a full cambered snowboard would be.
Less hooky, like Peter Pan.
Yes.
Dr. Hook. Wait, that's not right. Why would you be like, Pure Pop's the one I want?
Maybe you want all of the benefits of camber, but you still want a board that's a little bit looser in the tip and the tail, something that's slightly more forgiving, slightly more freestyle oriented.
Without getting too rockery.
Without it being too loose, You still get the benefits of camber, but you're also sort of making a little bit of an easier ride, a little bit more of a forgiving platform if you're learning.
So it's like someone that likes that traditional feel of a snowboard, but wants that more freestyle oriented looseness that they can bring into the park, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. This profile actually started off with Forum back in the day, if you guys remember Forum. They had a profile called Grand Pops, and it was on the Honey Pot, for example. Currently, there are a few other brands that also sort of do this variation of camber to flat. Capita calls it Resort V1, for example. Burton calls it Pure Pop Camber. Yeah, Forum used to call it Grand Pops Camber. All the same sort of marketing terminology for the same type of profile, which is that little bit of camber between the feet to flat.
Dudes, the next profile is the Rock Out Camber.
Oh, bro, tell me all about it, man.
Dude, this board, it rocks out. It's got their Rock Out Camber. So this is a super popular board from Solomon. This is the Pillow Talk, and it has one of their unique profiles.
Rock Out Camber. It's like a lifted flat zone. Imagine a cambered snowboard, but between your feet, it's entirely flat.
Another one where it's incorporating rocker, camber, and flat all together in one snowboard.
Yeah, there's like cambered zones at the tip and the tail that kind of come down, and that still ensures that you get all the stability of a cambered board.
Rockered zones.
No, cambered zones. Yeah, see how it's like camber right in the tip and the tail?
It says rocker.
Yeah, it's like rocker because it's activated under weight.
Right.
You know, but essentially the board is a cambered snowboard.
It looks cambered, but it says it's rockered.
Yeah, it's there. It sort of returns to a cambered shape in the tip and the tail, but then once it's actually weighted, the tip and the tail rise up off of the ground slightly. The contact point goes from being in the very tip, and it goes back maybe 3 centimeters or so just to give you a slight rockered zone in the tip and the tail. But that rockered zone is only there when the board is weighted. Overall, the board is returning back to a cambered shape, just with a flat section in between your feet instead of it being a consistent, constant arc. It's a lot more surfy feeling, especially when you're in trees. So this board feels a little bit looser when you need it to be, but still has that grip when you're in icy conditions or on groomed runs, for example.
So normally with a board like this, it might feel a little bit different in the powder once you drop off and then that actual edge doesn't activate quite as much. Is that true with this board?
Yeah, it's like in the powder, the board feels surfier, so if you want to take it in the trees, it's still nice and agile, but when you're on groomed runs, you still get the stability of a cambered snowboard.
You get that edge hold.
Yeah, you still get the grip.
You wouldn't get that feel of like a flat board on a groomer, but you still get the benefits of the flat board in the powder.
Exactly. And this board shape, this board profile is the exact same on like the Six Stick, for example, which is very popular.
It's very nice looking.
Yeah, it's a great board from Solomon. And then K2, they actually had like a year where all of their boards were flat, and then the next season after that, they made like a whole line of boards that were flat, but with just a little bit of camber in the tip and the tail to give it the benefits of camber. Like that was like the old K2 Happy Hour, for example.
I always wonder if the designer had like an aneurysm that year. Alright, so next up we have s-camber, and it's actually the same as the dump truck that you destroyed last year at this time when we went snowboarding.
R.I.P. dump truck.
You're really sad about that.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite boards, and I took it out just too early in the season and tore the edge right out.
On like the last turn of the day.
Yeah, it's always in the last turn that you find it.
Well, it was meant to be. I guess you got to move on at some point, but we're here now with the flight attendant. This also has the s-camber, or directional camber as it's called now.
Yeah, so I mean, this is probably the one that people were the most mad that I didn't mention in the last video. A lot of people were like, dude, why don't you just talk about s-camber or s-rocker, depending on the year, because it has all of the benefits of camber while still giving the board a lot of flotation in the deeper snow.
S-Rocker offers a spring-loaded blend of camber and rocker that's free-ride focused for maximum speed and float. Entry rocker extends from the nose to under your front foot, then transitions to camber between your feet. Compressing the camber causes the entry rocker to naturally lift the nose, thus improving float while maintaining momentum and stability through deep driving pow turns and variable conditions.
I guess...
Can you sleep at night?
No, I toss and turn all night long. This keeps me awake. I hope you're all happy. I thought that I had made it sort of obvious with the, hybrid cambers, but I never specifically talked about s-camber, and that's what you're going to see in a number of all-mountain category freeride inspired snowboards. So the flight attendant, for example, another Burton snowboard that uses that s-camber.
But they're calling it directional camber.
Yeah, nowadays they're just calling it a directional camber profile.
Potato.
Back in the day when rocker was more popular, they called it s-rocker, even though the dominant portion of the board was camber. So s-rocker, s-camber, depending on the year. But yeah, essentially the majority of the board is still a cambered snowboard. So, from the tail through the insert points here, the majority of the snowboard has that dominant cambered profile. So that's really good for when you're in resort, for when you want, carvability, for when you want pop. And then that big rockered zone in the front. There just ensures that you always have very good floatability in the deeper snow. And it also helps with turning initiation in the front of the board, so it's easier to get this thing into a turn, which is nice when you're in tight trees, for example.
But it's not perfect.
Nothing in this life is, Chris. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were talking about was how this might compare to like a flat powder board versus a cambered powder board.
Sometimes it can be a little bit too much. It might throw people off, literally.
Yeah, it's not as surfy feeling as something like the Storm Chaser, for example, or even the Mind Expander. This board having that dominant camber, you still need to be a little bit more careful on your edges. You're sort of on one edge or the other. You can't be as loose.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've definitely been in some tight situations in some techie spots where that edge locks in and it starts shooting you in a direction you don't want to go.
Yeah, like I find that when I ride a dominant cambered snowboard in the trees, I always have to be very careful about what edge I'm on so that I don't get hooked up. Versus when I'm riding like a flat snowboard through the trees, I don't have to worry about it as much because it's just sort of going to do the work for you. It's not as catchy. So yeah, a little bit more aggressive. You have to be a little bit more careful about what edge you're on and how you're riding the board. But ultimately, it does provide you with all of the benefits of camber. It's like, how do I say it? The more you give, the more you get. Even though the board is a little bit more work, it also does give you a little bit more. That camber is super versatile as well. So you can ride this board on a day where it's not a powder day, just on the groomered runs, for example, and it still holds up really nice and gives you the benefits of that camber feel.
Overall, really good board for that like old school camber vibe in person that loves powder. Full mountain techie style riding where you're maybe doing some shoots and some technical riding, you're hitting a bit of powder, you're carving, you're just shredding all around. Andreas, we're here with our first Lib Tech board. This is using their C3 profile. It's a more aggressive, it's kind of a flip on the C2. The C2's rocker dominant, this is camber dominant.
Yeah, like when I look at this kind of snowboard, I try not to overcomplicate things for people. I usually just tell them it's a camber dominant snowboard. It feels like a cambered snowboard for all intents and purposes when you're riding it in resort on groomed runs.
But there's a rocker section in the middle.
There is a slight rockered section in the middle, but it only activates when you're in deeper snow conditions. So the whole concept here is that when you're in powder, you don't need to set your binding stance back. You can literally keep it centered, and that slight rockered section between your feet helps you float in the powder.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, we looked at a ton already. What sets this one apart from Pure Pop and now all the rest?
I would say that this profile is probably the closest to like a pure camber profile as far as still getting that like dominant stability and that dominant pop. Literally that slight rocker is just to sort of offset the pressure points when you're in powder, just to give it a little bit better surf.
So Battalion, they're famous for having their 3BT. They got their big cut up edges on the nose and the tail, but they have...
Yeah, a dominant camber throughout the regular portion of the snowboard. So it's sort of another great example of a camber rocker hybrid. It's just achieving it in a weird way that no other board brand is doing. So throughout the actual length of the snowboard, it's still a dominant camber. But when you look at it head on, the board has 3 distinct levels to it that the board can then sort of rocker back and forth between. So it's almost like having a rockered section in your tip and your tail widthwise.
From like heel to toe.
So it's almost like having like a
rocking chair under your foot.
But then the dominant camber throughout the rest of the board still gives you really good stability and pop. So it's Battalion or Lobster's way of achieving the same kind of hybrid that like a camrock system would give you. It's just their version of it. Yeah, it definitely makes for a board that initiates a turn really easily. It also makes those tips and tails feel way less catchy.
Like ultra catch free.
Yeah.
Like impossibly catch like you if you're catching 3VT, you're doing something wrong or right. I don't know, but you're doing it.
So that triple base technology almost acts like a boat hull, and in the deeper snow, it's going to help mitigate the turbulence of chopped up powder. So yeah, triple base technology is sort of like a rocker in the tip and the tail. Yeah, it's like 3 distinct surface platforms.
Pretty cool.
Instead of it being a continuous surface articulation, like in the Jones.
Continuumness.
I mean, if you guys check out TJ's latest video on Board Archive, he was talking about the party wave, the battalion party wave, and you can see just how distinct and how exaggerated the triple base technology is in the tip of that board. So some honorable mentions, guys. Contract Snowboards, back in the day, it was like some weird brand from 2011. They made this 3D snake technology, which essentially looks like a flying V snowboard back to back if they took, you know, those 2 different cambered profiled sections and doubled the amount of camber and rocker. So it was like this weird undulating snake. Made no sense. I have no idea how it rode. I think I saw one video of someone riding it, but they weren't ever available in North America. Just a weird wonky shape that I always look back and remember about. If anybody out there has tried that 3D Cobra technology, or 3D Snake Tech as they called it, let me know, because I was always really...
Thought it was something in your imagination.
Yeah, it was always something that really intrigued me.
Like, did that even happen? Somebody out there, if you know it did, tell me so I know I'm not insane.
I've never even been to Mount Vesuvius.
Cool story, Hansel.
The brand that we would all know from badminton over here in North America, Yonex,
Of course.
is also very popular for making snowboards in Japan, and Yonex totally went on an experimental spree, making all kinds of weird profiles. One of the ones that most intrigued me was a double rocker. So instead of having camber under your feet with rocker between your feet, it was camber between your feet with rocker underneath your feet specifically. And I have no idea how that would feel. I mean, it must have been like super loose, but also kind of catchy right between your feet. I have no idea.
If anybody out there knows, leave a comment.
And then last but not least was this like total monstrosity that Lib Tech made back in the day. Not many people even know about this snowboard. It was part of their experimental division, but the POW Pod. The POW Pod was made from like 4 or 5 distinct platforms that got put together on a spine, and then you rode that.
Tell me about your board.
Ever seen a snowboard from the future before?
No, I haven't.
What does it do? Like, what's the special thing for it?
Everything is what it does. Yeah.
So it's good for like those spin things when you're just like doing the butter?
Well, that'd be included in everything, so yeah.
It was super weird.
Yeah.
It was really out there. It was from the future.
And the past at the same time. It was like, it's from the future in the pile of snowboard rejects from the future.
It was the history of our future.
Yeah.
Today.
So hopefully you guys feel like you've been on a history lesson today to the past
Back into history.
and future, because I feel like I've learned a thing or two.
I think that we've tried to mention the main camber profiles that we forgot to mention in the last video. But if you guys know of another camber profile out there,
Probably at least one.
well, there's probably like still many micro iterations of the camber profiles that we have talked about.
And
Like-
people will not stop heckling you until you mention every single one.
Yeah, like Lib Tech makes like XC2 and C2BTX and all kinds of different variations with lesser and more amounts of rocker and camber. But without getting too much into all of those slight variations, I think we've talked about the majority of camber profiles.
I think part of this series as well is to create a blueprint that people can understand what's out there in the market. It's not necessarily to say everything that's out there, it's just so we give you the tools to understand what is out there.
Exactly.
Sweet. Well,
And then we can always add more videos later, just like this video. This video is a part 2.
I want to see a part 3. More view time.
So get on it, snowboard industry. We didn't even mention 3D hydrodynamic channels.
That is true.
That's part of a profile, but it's not the main distinct feature of a
3D.
profile. So that's another video.
Well, we'll see you there.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to check out Chris's latest video all about side cuts.
I thought it was really good.
I also
But I'm
enjoyed
biased.
watching it. I'm in it. You can see me.
My mom said she liked it too.
My mom thinks I'm cool.
But yeah, so far, 4th one of the series where we've done noses, side cuts, camera profiles 1 and 2. And we still got more things to talk about. We got bases, we got tails.
We have boot fitting. All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.